Fritz, and I teach history here at Western New Mexico University.
Wow, I have a few questions for you.
Okay.
Question number 1. Can you tell me the rebellion from both sides? The Spaniards' POV and the Pueblo's POV.
The Spaniards' point of view regarding the Pueblo Revolt of 1680 must have been shocking to them. I don't think that they would have anticipated such a coordinated attempt to push them out of New Mexico. Historically, the Pueblos spoke different languages. They had their different systems of government. The ability of Pope, the leader of the Pueblo Revolt, to bring together this alliance of Puebloan villages must have shocked the Spaniards. So I really think the Spaniards felt shocked. Now, from the Pueblos' perspective, I would say that the majority of the Pueblos supported Pope. They were angry at the fact that they had lands taken from them. They were also angry of the fact that the Spanish had asserted undue power over them. And that was particularly on the part of the medicine men. If you remember, Pope was a medicine man. He had been arrested back in 1675 with a group of 47 other medicine men. And the governor, a governor by the name of Trevino, had ordered their punishment, and eventually they were going to be sent into slavery. But I think maybe up to 1,000 Tiwa warriors came to Santa Fe, surrounded the capital, and demanded that the governor release the 47 medicine men, which he did. And I think the fact that these medicine men had been physically abused by Spanish authorities just made them very angry, not the least of which was Pope. And I would say also that what the medicine men also hated was the fact that they had lost power. That is, the Catholic missionaries had gone into the different pueblos and had literally forced the people to convert to Christianity. And that meant that the medicine men had lost power, and the missionaries took over that religious power. And so I think on the part of the spiritual leaders, they were angry. And so those would be two reasons. That'd be one of the reasons why the Pueblos were very angry at the Spaniards.
Question number 2. Why did the Pueblos take so many years and finally decide to give resistance in 1680?
First of all, the policies of the Spanish took time. That is, the policy to assimilate the Puebloan peoples to a Spanish culture took time. And also, I think we could say that the impact of disease that the Spanish brought with them, like smallpox, took some time to affect the Puebloan peoples. And it wasn't until the 1660s do we see a conflict emerge between the Spanish governors and the Spanish missionaries. And what happened in 1660, this one Governor Mendizabal wanted to take power away from the Christian missionaries because they had a squabble with each other. And in so doing, the governor legalized the worship of cachinas. And what some historians believe is that that emboldened the medicine men, actually brought these medicine men back to power. So that through the 1660s and into the 1670s, we see that the medicine men are actually starting to come back to power. But then what we find is that in the 1670s, there was a series of droughts and also famine. And there is also the spread of smallpox once again that actually decimated large numbers of Puebloan peoples. And now these medicine men who had been emboldened by the policies of Governor Mendezabal to legalize the worship of Cachinas were saying to the people, the Puebloan, their people, that the reason why your people are sick, hungry, and suffering is because over generations you had abandoned the traditions of your fathers and of your mothers, and you had now adopted a foreign religion. And they were saying that this is the reason why you are suffering. And so I think it took some decades for sentiment against the Spaniards to develop. But again, I think that the impact of disease, it eventually culminated in the 1670s. And with the policies of Governor Mendezabal that legalized Kachina worship, now these medicine men feel that they have a chance to drive the Spaniards out of New Mexico. And it probably also took an individual that had a lot of charisma, like this man by the name of Pope, to come to power and come up with a plan to bring all the Pueblos together in order to drive the Spaniards out. So that must have taken some time as well. So I guess the negative impact that the Spanish had on the Puebloan peoples must have taken some decades to develop sufficiently to result in the Puebloan peoples getting mad at the Spanish. I guess that would be my answer. That's a good question. I've never really thought about that much.
Question 3. Can you tell me how many casualties were recorded during the Pueblo Revolt?
There were not too many Spaniards in New Mexico relative to the Pueblo population. In the 1600s, the Spaniards were a complete minority. I don't know what the exact number of Spaniards there were, but indeed there must have been at least 100 deaths, if not more. In the end, what happened was that the Spaniards were driven back into Santa Fe. I do know that the number of Puebloan warriors who followed the command of Pope amounted to some 8,000 warriors. I think in one book it said that 8,000 warriors surrounded Santa Fe and they cut off the water supply, and eventually the Spaniards sued for peace and agreed to leave New Mexico. Now the number of Spaniards who left New Mexico amounted into several hundreds, 300-400 perhaps, Spanish citizens left. And I think we could say too that the members of the Isleta Pueblo would follow the Spaniards as well when they went down to the village of El Paso del Norte. So the number of casualties, I don't think we know the exact number, but it would have amounted to maybe 100, 200 Spanish deaths, and then 300 or 400 remaining Spaniards. Of course, they're forced out of New Mexico and they'll reside in the El Paso Valley for 12 years.
Question 4. What did government Arthur try to do to defend the Spanish, if anything at all?
At the last minute, the Spanish came to hear about this uprising. Apparently, there was a Puebloan runner. Pope had these cords, and they were knotted, and the Pueblos were to untie each knot. And for some time, the Spanish didn't know about that. Now, the Spanish captured one of these Pueblo runners who had one of those cords. And apparently the Spaniards interrogated the runner and asked them, what's the purpose of these knots? And so the Spaniards would learn of the purpose of these knots about a day before the actual revolt was to occur. Pope learned that and quickly would speed up the revolt by one day and would attack the Spanish settlements a day early. So essentially, the Spanish really didn't do anything, from what I know. What I know is that the Spanish at the last minute heard that the uprising was imminent, but it was too late. Pope already ordered the rebellion to occur a day early. And so eventually what happened was the Puebloan warriors under Pope attacked Spanish settlements, by first driving off the horses so that the Spanish could not use those horses to escape. And any of the remaining Spanish who could escape, they retreated back to Santa Fe. And then there, Governor Oterman would have barricaded the perimeter of Santa Fe. So I can only imagine, been in Santa Fe, been in the plaza, you only imagine those streets coming in. They probably had those streets barricaded off. And I would imagine that there would have been Spanish soldiers with rifles at each one of those streets to ensure that the Puebloan warriors do not come in. So in fact, it would be for about 9 days that the Spanish were held up in Santa Fe. And I think the Spanish could have stayed in Santa Fe well defended. But of course, they're going to run out of water. And of course, they're going to run out of food. But water, of course, is more important because you live longer without food, but you can only live for about 3 days without water. So the idea being there is that once their water supply was cut off, they had to give up. And so they surrendered and agreed to leave New Mexico. So I would say that what Governor Oterman did was essentially engage in a defensive action to defend his people, the Spaniards that is, inside Santa Fe itself. And all else could he do? What else could he do? He could just simply say, yes, we will leave New Mexico and never return again.
In your eyes, how do you see the Pueblo Revolt? A symbol of defense or a deliberate act of insubordination with the Spanish?
I think it was more akin to defense, defending the Pueblo's way of life, defending their economic interests. Some historians argued that this was the first American Revolution. Some historians will oftentimes say that this was the first successful Native American resistance effort. And in fact, it was successful. It was successful because the Spanish were driven out of New Mexico for 12 years. I would say that the Spanish, well, let me backtrack. I would say that they were successful in defending their way of life because what Pope ultimately would do is try to return the Pueblo peoples back to a more traditional way of living. Of course, he will force the Puebloan peoples to abandon their practice of Christianity. He will force the Puebloan peoples to abandon Spanish crops, so wheat, to stop using horses and other livestock that the Spanish brought, to try to bring back a traditional way of living. In many ways, it was successful. He's defending their way of life. By driving the Spanish out, the Puebloan peoples are reclaiming their properties. They're reclaiming their lands. They're reclaiming their identities. They're reclaiming their traditional forms of spirituality. They're reclaiming their identities as Native peoples. They're reclaiming New Mexico from foreign occupiers, particularly foreign occupiers that had done them wrong. I think in many ways I'm some of a supporter of Pope and what he did because he was correct. I mean, the Spanish had forced the Pueblo peoples to convert to Christianity. The Spanish had declared the worship of their traditional gods illegal until the 1660s. And the spread of European diseases. Now, while Pope might not have realized about those diseases like smallpox, nevertheless, the Spanish had brought in foreign diseases that had decimated large numbers of Puebloan people. So by driving the Spanish out, I think in that sense, Pope is helping to defend the Puebloan peoples from further problems that could be caused. So I would say he was defending the Puebloan peoples.
If you were in the Pueblo,
The last question.
If you were in the Pueblo Revolt, which side would you choose? Spanish or Pueblo? Why would you choose a side?
Okay. Well, if I was participating in the Pueblo Revolt of 1680, I myself would be Pueblo. I would be native. Of course, you can see I'm Anglo. I have no Indian blood in me at all. So I would have to be native to New Mexico, and I would support what Pope did. Now, I do know that there were some villages, Puebloan villages, that did not join the rebellion. And what's that?
Zuni?
Yeah, Zuni's one of them. And I would have supported Pope because, like what I said, he was seeking to protect the Puebloan peoples from foreign influence, foreign usurpation, or that is, foreign control of their lands, and protecting me as an identity, as a person, as a native person. I would want to remain connected to my traditions so I can maintain an identity as a Puebloan person. I think that I would understand that if I had assimilated to a Spanish world, that in the end, maybe I would be the best Spaniard, best Catholic, let's say, but still I'm going to be at the bottom of Spanish society because I am Los Indios, I'm an Indian, which they were always considered to be at the bottom of Spanish society. So I would be angry about that, and I would want to embolden my identity by supporting Pope. I think I would be very angry at the Spanish taking over the control of my village. I think I would be very angry over the fact that Spanish settlers might have been taking some of my farmland, maybe taking some of my water. I myself might not realize that because people are dying all around me, that I might not realize that this was because of some foreign disease like smallpox. I might not know that. But I might think that it was because the Spanish brought with them some foreign god that my peoples were beginning to identify with. Maybe if I had converted to Christianity, but yet the missionaries allowed me to continue worshiping my traditional gods, then maybe I wouldn't be as angry. Or maybe I wouldn't be as angry if I had the choice between converting and not converting. But before the 1680 revolt, you had to convert, or you would be imprisoned. And I would have seen that in my village. And so that would make me angry. Maybe there's nothing wrong with Christianity, but if you're going to force it on me, then that's going to make me angry. And so I think that would be a reason why I would support Pope. He's protecting my economic interests. He's protecting my cultural interests. And he's going to help reestablish Native American governance, Native American control over our lands. So I think that would support Pope. I might even participate in the war against the Spaniards too.
How do you think the Spanish and Pueblo feel about final results of the rebellion? They're proud or ashamed?
I think that the Spanish would have been ashamed. The reason being is that when they reoccupy New Mexico starting in 1692, they adopted a new policy vis-a-vis the Pueblo villages. That is, when they reoccupied Santa Fe, they adopted a policy of allowing the Pueblos to convert to Christianity on a voluntary basis. So to me, it's almost as if the Spaniards had learned their lesson, and hence they must have felt ashamed at what they had done 12 years earlier, or back in the earlier parts of the 1600s. I think that for the Pueblo peoples, those who had supported Pope, I think that they would have had a sense of pride that they didn't take it lying down. They stood up. Now maybe in the end Pope dies, which we think was in 1688. Maybe Pope died, and this new leader by the name of Tupatu comes to power. He was very charismatic, and he basically allowed the Spanish to come back. But I think that they would have had pride in the fact that they had resisted the Spanish years earlier. Now there will be a second Pueblo uprising that begins in 1696, and that one was pretty brutal for the Spaniards. It took the Spaniards 4 years to squash the second Pueblo uprising. So from 1696 to about 1700, thereabout, the second uprising, it took some time for the Spanish to quell. I think that second Pueblo uprising shows that there's still lingering animosity against the Spanish. It's not like all the Pueblos just welcomed the Spanish back. So to me, they still have that sense of pride in what Pope had done. That is, they still have that pride, and that's why they willingly took part in the second Puebloan uprising. So to answer your question, I think the Spanish must have had a great sense of shame, and the Puebloan peoples would have still had this continued sense of pride. Pride that still continues to this day, I'd say.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think that the Spanish had learned their lesson. And what we find is by the 1700s, the Spanish treat the Puebloan peoples in a much more humane way. Not for several reasons. One reason being that they no longer forced conversion to Christianity. You could still practice the worship of Cachinas or worship the gods on Okupin, which is Sandia Peak, or you could convert to Christianity if you wanted to. So there's voluntary conversion, that they learned their lesson. The second one was in the 1700s, the Spanish began to recognize the sovereignty of each one of the Puebloan villages. And what the Spanish did in the 1700s, they gave out staffs of authority to each one of the village headmen. So what the Spanish are doing in the 1700s is recognizing that each one of the Pueblo villages have their own sovereign governments. And moreover, what the Spanish begin to do too is recognize that Pueblo villages have title to their farmlands. And they essentially protected they protected Pueblo farmlands from being taken over by Spanish settlers because they recognized land titles of the Pueblo villages. So to me, the Spanish learned their lesson, and as a result, the Pueblo Revolt of 1680 had accomplished great things.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.